Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, rocking on to item 9. The Opawaho, Heathcote and Huritini Halswell stormwater management plans. So we are... Who have we got coming for this?
We should have Paul Dixon.
Might be a bit ahead of time, are we? I know Tom couldn't come till 3, could he? Kevin, you're in the hot seat. Thank you. So we're receiving this, and also this has been to both community boards prior to coming here, is that correct? Pretty sure?
Yes, and my apologies, I'm not really prepared for this. There's been a bit of a mix-up in Paul's calendar, I think. Yeah. But I do know the subject matter reasonably well, as does Helen. So...
well, it's a huge piece of work, and really appreciate the work that's gone into it. So with the... can you just tell me, with the land drainage recovery program's been disestablished now, so what do we call it now? Is it just within the internal... Oh, thanks, Helen. Just call it the Flood Management Program and Internal Works and Council.
So the Land Drainage Recovery Program was a specific program of works in response to the earthquakes and the enormous amount of work that was needed across the city on both the stormwater system but also across our flood protection infrastructure. And as you know, the biggest projects were those that were completed in the Flockton area and then the ones that are underway in the Heathcote area. Where we've got to in terms of now being almost 10 years post-earthquakes is that most of that recovery work has been completed.
Yeah.
So all of the projects of the Land Drainage Recovery Program have now been put back into business as usual within our stormwater management and floodplain management portfolios. So the flood protection activity and the stormwater activity cover off all of those projects.
Yeah, that's great.
So the stormwater management plans, of course, are closely related, but they are a statutory requirement of the comprehensive stormwater network discharge consent.
Right. So I think looking at the conclusion in this, this actually feeds into a lot of the recommendations that we just had from the Zone Committee, that, you know, raising awareness and educating citizens on how to stop contaminants at source, removing contaminants from stormwater and waste streams before they enter natural water, restore waterway corridors to a natural state, restore and plant riparian margins, improve in-stream habitat by sediment removal, riparian tree planting for temperature control, bank stability and shelter, and improve biodiversity to improve food sources for in-stream life. I mean, they're really good, strong ecological goals, and I think that actually is a very good document to help the community groups to get on board and actually help deliver these as well, because we're not going to do it just by ourselves. So I'm really impressed with this. Has anyone got any questions for staff? Melanie? And then Yanni?
There's a couple of sections that don't actually look finished, like it says this section is still to be completed for flood hazards and...
Yes. Yeah, so that section is subject to some further modelling work, hydraulic modelling work, and that work needs to be completed before the document's complete, really, and that links back to conditions within the consent that Helen's referred to.
So how far away is that flood modelling work? Do you know?
For the Huritini, it's close. For the Opawaho, it's further away, and that's the subject of some discussion between us and ECAN at the moment as to potential timeline impacts on the delivery of that SMP.
Right.
It's quite a critical element, that flood management component of the consent. It was, you may recall, the subject of part of the appeal on that consent, original consent decision that our experts between ECAN and the city went into some considerable discussion on over several months. And so we're carefully threading our way through that to make sure that we do meet those requirements.
So is this coming back to this committee before it goes out for consultation?
Don't believe so.
The intention wasn't, we would fill in that, we wouldn't put it out to consultation until we filled in that flood, but it's a technical flood mapping, modelling basically, that needs to be done to fill in that gap.
But we don't have a timeline on that, so we don't know when it's going out for consultation then, is that right?
Because we're not recommending it go out for consultation either in the recommendations. It's just we're receiving this information in these reports, but don't quite get the process.
So the process for these documents are that the final approval lies with Environment Canterbury, not with this council. So what we're doing is recommending that the committee receive these so that you understand what's in them in terms of the information, and that we go out for consultation with the community. Then we'll make any changes, bring them back to this committee so that you understand what they are and can be involved in responding to what we hear through that consultation process, and then they'll be lodged with Environment Canterbury for approval as part of the consent.
So today we are recommending they go out for consultation then, really, aren't we?
In effect, you are, yes.
Without having
yes,
seen the
what
whole
we would
thing.
like to do is continue with the consultation. The flood modelling is, as noted, is a technical requirement.
So just to be clear, they can't go out for consultation until the flood modelling is complete?
That's correct, although we continue to engage with the community, because we're engaging with the community all the time on the works that are already underway in the catchment. So we are implementing this work as we are finalising the plans for it, because we're not we're not going to stop any of the work that we're doing in these two catchments.
So is there a timeline that this has to be received by Environment Canterbury?
Yes, there is, and we're not going to meet that, which is why we're now in negotiations with them around the timelines that are embedded in the consent and the timelines that we need to complete the modelling that's also required by the consent.
Yeah.
So we don't yet have that completely confirmed.
Right.
Part of that delay was related to COVID, delay of some of that modelling work.
So can we be kept informed about the timeline and what's happening about that, Helen?
Yes.
Along the way?
Yeah, we'll keep this as a section in our bi-monthly report to you.
Thank you, that'd be good.
On the stormwater consent, so we've got a dedicated section to that now.
Great. Okay, that's comforting. Jimmy, do you have a question?
But these two documents on the from the page, you know, the date you particularly specify this in June 2021. Whether it's after consultation final version. Am I right?
That's correct.
Okay. But regarding to paragraph 1.4, particularly engage with all those stakeholders, key stakeholders, is council initiate consultation with them, or can take a lead to, to consultation with them?
No, the consultation is led by us, because it's a requirement of our resource consent.
Okay,
and then the plan is finally approved by Environment Canterbury.
Yes.
As part of the condition of the resource consent. So it's a staff process,
Yes.
not a councillor process at Environment Canterbury.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Anne, and then Yanni?
Yeah. I'm just wondering, in terms of, thank you for all this work and for the amazing stuff that's happening out in this area. I mean, the wetlands are so appreciated by people. I don't really think they understand why they're there, and I think that's a challenge actually, but they certainly appreciate them. But I'm just wondering, when you go out for consultation with this, what would you hope to get back from the community?
I guess, yeah, we don't have any particular hopes. We're basically just taking an open book approach, laying out the document as it can be seen, some of the rationale behind. You'll appreciate from what you've seen there is it's quite a document,
It is.
each of those documents. There's a significant amount of work behind each of them. They've been in development now, particularly the Heathcote one, for probably 6 years. It was sort of revised significantly as the comprehensive consent requirements required as that process unfolded. So, you know, I think that we've endeavoured to keep the various stakeholders and in the community space engaged, particularly over the last 12 months or so, with community boards, zone committees, etc. So it's really, as I say, we don't have particular hopes, but we do see that there is a lot of thought being given, and we haven't had many people objecting to what we're putting forward to date anyway.
Okay, so in lots of ways it's really informing the community in terms of what's happening out there.
Yes.
One of the comments through the stormwater, the comprehensive stormwater consent, is a number of parties specifically asked for them to buy into this process. So I'm hoping we may get almost a level of a peer review of these documents by some of them. Admittedly, they'll have a conservation lens on, or they'll have a zone committee lens on, or they'll have. But I am hoping that they actually get quite a lot of professional attention, and some of that will come back and make it a better document. But they were very adamant that they wanted to be quite involved in these documents. So
That's
yeah,
good.
might be exciting, might not be either.
Yeah, Annie, did you have a question?
Several questions. I mean, there's a lot of detail in here. I think the key thing is really to understand the financial implications. Is there a clear table that kind of explains what our financial commitments are to doing what's in here?
The significant capital works that are described within the SMPs are largely already within the current LTP, and other components are within the proposed draft LTP.
Is that OPEX as well as CAPEX, or just CAPEX?
And OPEX within the current LTP, yes.
Right.
Within the proposed, I'm not too sure, because to be quite honest, I'm not 100% certain of where the proposed draft OPEX components of the LTP sit.
And I guess that's what worries me about the timing, is like what comes first. Like, we're going to go out and consult on what we've got in the current LTP, but we've got a proposed LTP which could be quite different. And I just wonder how we kind of align that timing.
Yeah.
Do we have, what's the statutory time frame to consult the community on this?
Well,
There's a 2-month period prior
Yeah.
to approval by Environment Canterbury.
But are we,
So we are.
do we have to go out ahead of the draft LTP being adopted, or can we wait for that time?
I probably need to raise, there's another component which relates to what the member is referring to in terms of engagement with the community and the commitment of funding, if you like, to meet the SMP guidance. Within the conditions of the stormwater consent, we inserted a condition which requires the provision of what's referred to as an implementation plan. Now, that's a citywide plan that draws guidance from SMPs, and I forget the exact wording of the condition, but it's something along the lines that the implementation plan will be prepared in coordination with the preparation of an LTP. Right, so the general process, without sort of referring to the sequencing of things happening too much, is that as SMPs are developed, and you'll appreciate that SMPs will be both generated and then revised on an ongoing basis through the term of the consent. In round figures, about every year we'll either be preparing a new SMP or reviewing and revising one, and then every 3 years, of course, normally we will have a new LTP, And at that time, we will produce a new implementation plan that will take the SMPs as they stand at that time, what they are proposing, which, you know, what they're proposing isn't mandated by council. That's, as Helen has said, a statutory requirement. What's in there is required by the consent. That will align, that implementation plan will align what's in those SMPs to what council ultimately decides is the way forward for council through the LTP.
With staff guidance on what the priority
With
works are.
staff input to that.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm
Now-
just kind of mindful of like our budget pressures and
Yes.
all the conversations we're having, which
Yep.
again, we're in a kind of awkward situation that, you know, what can we say? But I just wondered in terms of if we publicly consulted on this at the same time as we were doing the draft LTP, then people can clearly see what's on budget to meet what's in the catchment plan. But
Yep.
if we go ahead of that process, then it feels like it's kind of not quite in sequence.
Yeah, and it's partly that I fully see what you're referring to there. I think with the next LTP, it will be a lot clearer. Because at that point, we will have been through the preparation of an implementation plan. This time around, we haven't, largely because of the timing of when the consent decision was handed down about a year ago, and where the SMPs that we're referring to here and other ones are currently at in their
So just
in
a
their
really
development.
simple thing, like where it says, for example, we're going to audit 15 high-risk industrial sites a year,
Yeah,
that will happen. Like that won't be, oh, we don't have enough enforcement or monitoring staff, and therefore we're not going to deliver that. What's in here has to happen because it's part of the consent.
That's correct.
Once this is adopted by ECAN.
That's correct.
Well,
And we do have operational funding for that work.
Right. Okay.
I think one of the useful analogies that might help in terms of how these fit is they're a little like as our water safety plans drive the priorities in our asset management plans and our activity plans, but they're a statutory document and approved by someone else. These are much the same in the stormwater space. So these will inform our asset management plans and our activity plans and our priorities in those documents.
Okay, good. And just the other final question was, do we have a communication and engagement plan, like, or consultation plan? Like, I don't quite understand what the timing is around. Are we having any community meetings? We've got 2 months, I think you said, to engage with people. What's the time frame that we're doing that? Are we printing? I know it's very technical, but you know, are we going to make hard copies available to people in libraries or in service centres, or how are we communicating?
yeah, we do have a communications and engagement plan that's been in development since, I'm not sure exactly when, it was sometime during lockdown we initiated that with our communications staff. And that's communications advisor has been to the community board meetings, zone committee meetings, etc., and is advising on the formal engagement
So
process.
how can we see that at a governance level? We just ask for it.
Would you like a copy
Yeah,
of the
we can-
I'd like, yeah,
consultation?
I mean, normally when we approve things to go up for consultation, and this is slightly unusual and
This
unique.
is
I
a little
appreciate
bit
that.
different, yeah.
But
Yeah.
we normally would be told, you know, it's going to be opening on this date, it's going to go this time,
Yeah.
here's the sessions
This
that
is
we're going to
this
host.
is different. This is provided for information.
Yeah.
Mm.
So it's a little bit different to, you know, like a statutory, or one of the policy and planning documents that
Yeah.
Brendan would usually bring to you.
Will we
So
put,
this is an implementation plan and a statutory requirement of a condition of consent.
Yeah.
However, it's a very important one.
yeah, and I think there'll be a lot of
and
public
we're
interest.
keen that councillors understand what's in it, what the implications of it are. But yes, we do have a communications and
Yeah.
engagement plan, and yes, we can share that with you if you would
Thanks,
like.
Helen. And we don't know when it's going out though, do we?
Well, we're still negotiating the timelines
Yep.
with Environment Canterbury.
Oh,
Mike?
We don't know when it's going out. How's that actually affecting all our, like we seem to have so many different consultations happening all at the same time over a short period of time, a long period of time. It's like,
Well, this one's not going to be
This
for a
one
while.
will be a bit more targeted.
Katie, welcome.
Yes, sorry, a little undercooked, was not here for this presentation. But I can provide a memo up with the consultation and engagement tactics for this, rather than the whole plan, which I think you might find a bit operational. But we'll give an overview of start times, key tactics, what we're proposing, to give you a degree of comfort if that's appropriate.
Yeah, and we can feed back to that.
But it's not going to kick in at the same time as the LTP, which is what Mike's concerned about.
No, well,
We don't know.
it's not just the LTP though. I think we have
Climate
so many
change,
different
coastal
projects and
hazards.
strategies, etc., that are happening. We need to actually work out what we can actually, what we do have the capacity to actually consult with.
Or what the community has the capacity
to be consulted on. Yeah, because I think we're just doing too much.
Don't forget, we're waiting for the flood modelling work to come back in, which, as Kevin said, could be considerable time away.
And
Fair
we are
enough.
talking with very discrete geographic areas and, you know, specific environmental groups. So it's not a sort of like a citywide conversation to the same extent.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the timetable of some of this got set as part of the comprehensive stormwater consent. So, and again, I might not have the dates, but I think one of them had to be within 18 months of the start of the consent, and then another one in 2 years after the start. One of the things, and maybe going back to Councillor Johansson's question, if you have a look, for example, on 134, some of the timing we've got in there will be after the 2021 LTP. So that will give you the opportunity, depending, to enable us to manipulate or you know, look at the funding side and the implications of some of that. We haven't actually got set dates in there, but we may get something from the community that says, we think that's really, really important, and we could feed that back into the LTP and we could decide whether we can afford it or not. So there's some things that we need to do because we've got an external driver, which is our consent, and basically we are trying to coordinate, so we do need to bring it back to you with the right advice so that we can give you some advice on funding.
Just getting the funding stuff sorted would be really good, like things like district plan changes. I mean, if you read back through the flooding management plan for the Heathcote, it's really clear that we haven't done a lot of stuff that we said we'd do. Like, we haven't restricted development, we've actually increased and enabled development to happen in a large part of that area. So unless we have a specific budget tagged to the actions, I'm concerned that it won't happen. Well, we rezoned the whole Kinaway Farms to industrial. And like, I mean, you don't get a better opportunity than that to look at a floodplain.
There'll be
So there are additional
conditions.
setbacks, and the flood management areas were extended and the high hazard flood management areas were introduced in the last round of the district plan.
Yeah,
And
but
we
this
are
goes
already-
back to 1998.
Yeah, but we're updating our modelling in the Heathcote catchment to reflect all of that new infrastructure, and we'll update the district plan flood modelling maps again. So that's ongoing, and that work will keep going.
But we also have residential medium density as well in the area as well.
Yes, but the district plan provides mapping of the flood management areas and floor level requirements for any new development in those areas, so that they're above the 200-year floods.
Yeah, I get that.
I think it's
So
yeah.
I mean,
using one thing.
managing the floodplain is about preventing development in the high hazard areas, but then having the most appropriate development in the other areas, so that you manage the risk from the
If you
flooding.
read the private plan change that went through, or the plan change that went through around that Kinaway farm, really interesting to see what the ecological and the environmental assessment was versus the decision that was made. And I mean, it's quite sad really, because what it shows is that things like sea level rise and coastal erosion just weren't really seen as important compared to the cost of, or the economic benefit of the development. But I just think, I mean, there's a really good actions in here, the point that Dave's raised, but they don't have the budget attached. And I think we do need to be clear that if we want these things to happen, we need to attach a budget. That was really the key thing.
And there is some budget in there. I remember when we got the consent, we did put in some budget that I think, you know, look, going top of my head, 250, then 500, then 750 or something. There is some operational budgets in there to underlie principally our obligations, our bare obligations here. But through consultation, you may get a request from communities that they want more, and you're likely to get that.
Sarah?
Sorry, I just want to clear. I just think it's really unfair to use an example of one thing that was poor that happened in the past to justify saying that nothing's happened at all, especially when it's really clear that actually lots has happened and lots of extra restrictions and things have gone in the meantime. And I just thought we'd just clear that up. So
Anne?
Yeah, thank you. And Katie, in terms of this information, one of the cool things that's happening with the zone committees is that the community boards are becoming more active and more engaged. And I'm just wondering how we can engage community boards in this, in terms of being able to present the information that's here in quite a simple way, so that they then can educate the community. So is that something that you, as part of the plan, to actually with this document to engage with community boards? Yeah, it is, great.
Yep.
Yep, and that engagement has happened, and one of Katie's team has been along too.
Tara has been along.
Yeah, and there is an abridged, well, it's a shorter version of the SMPs, which Paul has developed, that very well pulls out the key points
Right. That's
for
helpful.
a less arduous read.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good.
There's one point I wouldn't mind raising, if that's okay, and it's mentioned towards the front of the SMPs, that in the course of the development of the SMPs, we have identified that to address the issues around stormwater, surface water, waterways, the SMPs play a part, but they are not the total way forward to produce the outcomes that council sees as necessary. And as Helen said, they are a statutory document. They fulfil specific needs under a consent to enable the council to discharge stormwater from its network. But there's a lot more water of a surface nature that we need to deal with or manage to achieve the outcomes in waterways, for instance, that we're looking for. So we see as a companion to the SMPs what we are referring to as a surface water strategic plan, which the integrated water strategy identified as one of the three pillars, if you like, of the water strategy, as being a key and important document, and that will reflect the more aspirational targets and objectives.
Yeah.
Where the SMP falls a bit short.
Yeah.
So the two sort of work together.
Yeah. No,
And that strategic plan, surface water strategic plan, is due for first draft coming back to this council in November 2021.
Great. So much work going on. Thank you. Are there any other questions? No? All right. Well, look, I'll happy to move this, to receive this. And I have a seconder. Jimmy?
Yeah.
Any further discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. Thanks, Kevin. That was nicely explained. Item 10,